Okay. And it should be kicking up live now. Hopefully. I think it's good.
Yep, I got a notification.
Perfect. Okay. All right. And we're ready to start.
Let's go.
Ready?
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to episode 40 of the TCCG Roundtable. We are changing things up a little bit, so not really sure how to do our full intro and stuff yet. We'll fix it as we go. But we are now your hosts, dragonrider, DankestDad, and RonMexico. That's right.
Hey.
3 of us now. Hello. Hi, guys.
Hey, everyone.
How's it going? Good to be here. Nice to be back after a little bit of a hiatus again.
Yes. Unintended hiatus. I think just a lot of stuff was going on, and it was like, yeah, just life and those things had to come first, unfortunately. But we are back and now joined by the wonderful DankestDad. So let's get to know you a little bit more, Dankest. For people who don't know you already, or maybe there's a couple people who are maybe joining because they do know you. Maybe they can learn a little bit more about you. So can you just tell us, like, what is your history with card games? Like, what got you into cards? What card games have you played? What has that led you to do in terms of, have you done content? Do you do tournaments? What is it that you have done? Just kind of give us that whole background and lead us through what your card game history has looked like.
Sure. So at the ripe old age of 8 years old, I was over at my friend's house, and he got some new Metal Raiders cards from Yu-Gi-Oh! And gave me some. And that's where my card game journey kicked off. I collected Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, played them with my friends in school and my cousins, was having a great time. And then my mom told me it was nerd stuff, and the story ended for a while until when I was in college, my sophomore year. My roommate showed up with a box of 600 bulk Magic cards after our final exams and was like, hey, guys want to build some decks and play? And I was like, seems cool. The Alpha to Hearthstone came out days later, and one of my roommates was in that. And that changed the trajectory of things greatly. And ever since that, I've played pretty much every card game I can get my hands on. So, of course, Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, Legends of Runeterra. I liked Artifact when it came out. Played some Soulforge back when the digital client came out back in the day. Loved Duelist. Loved the Smite game that was inspired by Duelist. And there are just too many games. If there's a card game that came out and there was an accessible way to play it, I've probably tried it and had some fun with it. These days now, sticking mostly to Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra and the Universes game physically. So I've been doing content primarily for Hearthstone and Universes these days, and you'll always find me at my 2 Universes locals every week I can, and I'll be trying my luck at the World Championships next week. So hoping for the best with that.
Yay! Yes, we wish you the best too. That's going to be exciting. We'll have to definitely be keeping up and watching. I hope you're going to be posting as much as you can, like after each round or something. I always love when our good friend and teammate Nails does that for his Pokemon VGC tournaments. He'll update the scores after every round, and it's like, okay, good, we're getting at least like semi-live results and updates. So if you can, we'd love to see that. But obviously, like, definitely focus and play while you're there. That's like the important thing, right?
Well, I just hope I win as much as Nails. That would be nice.
I was going to say, it's really nice seeing Nails updates because it's always like, I won again. I won. Yep. I lost this time, but I'm going to win the next one. Yeah. If you can play like Nails, then we got high hopes.
Well, it sounds promising. I feel like, at least, you've had a good kind of prep, right? You got a good practice group. So how do you feel like you're this is kind of derailing a little bit from the typical like interview
sure.
here, but just since you brought this up and it's next weekend, so it's like, all right, let's dive into this a little bit. So how do you feel just going into that? Like, do you feel like you're excited and prepared and the practice group has helped?
Oh, definitely. The guys that I play with here in Central Ohio, they are amazing and some of the most dedicated people in the whole community. So I kind of lucked out ending up where I was when I moved here. It was not something I expected to find, but a very welcome surprise. And the only thing that's been a little bit tough is balancing preparing for this tournament and the excitement for the new cards and the new format that have just come out. So Worlds is going to be on the past format now, which was the My Hero Academia Spotlight format. But as new IPs have come to universes, Standard is now the format that you play at locals. So, you got to balance the fact that, okay, at my local, do I want to, bring my deck for Worlds, practice as much as I can and be as ready as I can? Or do I want to try the new toys, have some fun with those, and do the serious practice later? And, trying to restrain myself a bit and stay focused on tournament prep instead of just getting into the new stuff is a bit of a challenge, but I'm doing what I can.
Fair. Well, like I said, we wish the best for you. Very excited. Ron, do you want to ask Dankest any questions or find out anything else from him before we exit our little interview?
I do, absolutely. So I was thinking about just the fact that, Dankest, you've regularly kind of had write-ups, deeper dives into like decks and different things where you just kind of explore like either the philosophy of a deck or kind of the ideas behind like different directions that you go in. And I was wondering what inspired that. What kind of pushed you towards that level of written content that you do so exceptionally well?
So I can say for me, it's just primarily how I engage with card games. Like I know that there's this whole concept of brewers versus honers, where there are the players who are really good at trying to create things, test new concepts, and explore the card pool. And then there are other players who are very good at the aspect of taking a deck and perfecting the play pattern of it and learning how it works inside and out. And, I think that primarily I identify more with the brewer group and, going through a deck, seeing why each card is there, what role it plays is really what's fun for me. So when like a new set comes out or I see a new deck idea, being able to think about how the designers intended for those tools to be used and what other uses there might be beyond that intention, or when there is a deck, seeing the overall goal. I think that has helped me a lot sort of work on that honer side of the skill. So like, because I understand where the deck is, I understand more of how to play it, and that sort of has been my guiding path of improvement over all of the years. Like when I started Hearthstone, I was not very good. And I think that my journey of getting to where I was took a lot longer than some of the other players who I know in the scene. But, I feel like my approach does work. And after nearly 10 years of playing Hearthstone specifically, I think I've gotten the handle on it for that game. And I've had a little bit of a faster clip of it with other games. But, just sort of that desire to learn, kind of explore the cards and, solve the puzzle that these games present. Like that's what drives me and makes me want to do those things.
I love that. Yeah, that's it's always a skill that I felt like I've very much been lacking in when it comes to like building and creating decks from scratch. I can't even wrap my head around it. So I just steal things from people like you.
Yeah. And then we have cheating players like Jambray who are just at both ends of the spectrum to both extremes, and they are just amazing at what they do. So
True. Unfair. John Bray, No Hands Gamer are two of the like premier people that come to mind for me in Hearthstone when it comes to like insanely good at creating new decks out of nowhere and then also piloting them like unbelievably well.
Yes, agreed. All right. Anything else that you want to mention, Dankest, before we kind of move on to some new stuff?
Oh, I think that about covers it, but I'm just excited to be here, and thanks again, you guys, for bringing me on.
Happy to have you here.
Yes, definitely. We we kind of had a little meeting. This is like a little bit of background, but yeah, we were like, okay, like we want to come back from this like unintended hiatus, but it's also kind of we're into the new year, and how do we want to change things up and kind of improve the show and build upon what we've already had? And both of us were like, Dankest. And we're like, okay, if he's available and he can join us, like, let's do it. And then
we had a short list. Yeah. We had a short list, and it was one person. It was like, okay, now we kind of want to add a new person, an additional person to the crew. And the person that we want is DankestDad. And then if he says no, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Let's just ask him first.
Well, I'm flattered.
It worked out nicely.
Yeah. And then you were like, yeah, I'm interested. We were like, well, that was easy. Okay. Like, all right.
Yeah. We're like, whew, okay.
We're like, whew, all right. So yes, very glad to have you. Thank you for the bit of background. And yeah, we got some things to talk about. So I'm just going to do a like super brief, real quick, like news thing here, just to touch on a couple of things. And then I'm going to let Ron and Dankest cover a couple of things for kind of competitive that's going to lead into our main overall topic for this week. So a couple of just news things here. We have some Riot and Blizzard layoffs, like Blizzard, Microsoft, Xbox, all of that company kind of in one. It was across all of those. But Riot did lay off 530 employees, and the Blizzard, Microsoft, Xbox lost 1,900 employees. That's really, really big chunks. I think the Riot one said it was like 11% of their workforce. 22,000 they said for Blizzard and Microsoft is how many they had, and then they're losing 1,900. So still like good chunks though. It's a lot of people to be losing their jobs. And of course, this does impact the games that we play. This impacts the card games specifically for these companies. And it's just very, very sad to see this continue to happen across different companies. So very unfortunate. But that did happen this week. So very current. In past news, we also did get the news over the last month or two that DC Dual Force, we had talked about that last year, that it kind of had come around. It came out. It was like, an exciting, cool new thing. And unfortunately, I guess it just did not work out. I don't know the exact details on that, but they did ultimately decide that they will be shutting down and no longer doing anything for DC Dual Force. So I believe sometime in February is when the game actually shuts down and nobody will be able to play it any longer. So that's another bit of kind of sad news in the card game world. And the last little bit that we have here for just some news that I just wanted to reiterate that we did bring up last year is that Star Wars Unlimited is a new card game that is coming out this year. The official launch date is March 8th of this year, 2024. So we do still have new card games that are releasing and coming out, and that is a big one that's coming pretty soon. So now we're going to jump in and dive a little bit more into the, I guess, details of how those kind of layoffs have affected the card game specifically. So, Ron, do you want to talk about the kind of changes to competitive Hearthstone, and then we'll have Dankest cover the Legends of Runeterra?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Hearthstone esports was kind of on life support over the last year. It's just a dramatically different format to what we were used to in all of the previous years of Hearthstone, with things like Masters Tour qualifiers and larger fields for Masters Tours, bigger payouts, and so on. It condensed to very few events, only 16 players qualifying for Masters Tours, and then an 8-person Worlds. And we're basically seeing the same thing this year, although it has been slightly upgraded to improve the player experience a little bit. It just seems, there's a whole lot of scaling back going on, and not to really blame too many of the people involved in Hearthstone esports. It seems like they did the best they could with the budget that they were provided, and they tried to listen to some feedback from the very few players who did qualify and how much of a grind it was, and they eased on the grind a little bit. We're down to just 3 total competitive events for Hearthstone esports for the entire year of 2024. There will be a spring championship, a summer championship, and the world championship. And the way you can qualify for worlds is either being the champion or runner-up of the spring, champion or runner-up of the summer, or being in the top 4 of total competitive points outside of those who have already qualified in those other ways. It's still only a 16-person field for the spring championship and the summer championship, and it will still be just an 8-person field in Worlds. Competitive points are earned based on ladder ranking still, which is always kind of a strange way it feels to have qualifiers for a tournament, which is a totally different format and skill set in so many ways than being able to succeed on ladder. But it is what it is, and at the end of the day, we all kind of collectively, I think, in the community have agreed that, hey, it's better than nothing. And as long as it still exists, it's something that furthers the visibility of the game and gives a payoff to those at the absolute highest tier of competition. It's sad in a lot of ways for so many of us who aren't, among the 16 best players in the world, because hey, we want to compete too. It's just not really available at this point in time. We can hold out hope for the glory days to return, but realistically, that's unlikely. And we should just, I guess, be thankful enough to have any level of esports rather than 0. That's where we're at.
Yeah. And especially with that too, I think that it makes the absence of fireside gatherings and other sort of third-party tournaments at the more local or smaller levels sting even more. Just because if you want to get into competitive Hearthstone, it's not easy these days. And, there are some great places, like we all participate in Team Hearth League, which is a good way to play grassroots, but it's not easy to find a place to get together with other players and have a social experience that's also competitive. And, it would be nice if Blizzard could either give some official support to that or make some resources available for it. That would be something I would have hoped for.
Right. But better to not hold your breath, because it's highly unlikely to be coming. And I mean, just when it comes to like a practical decision for players who are really good at card games, who want to invest their time in something in a competitive aspect, you need to really think long and hard about something like a system where only the top 16 are able to make it for the official events. You can play in other things, grassroots things, and they can be really fun, but you have to shift your focus. Like, you can't make any kind of living off of this unless you're in the top tier. And even if you are, it is a very stressful, tenuous way to make a living, because if you don't make it, that is a ton of hours and grinding that resulted in nothing.
Yes. And even as far back as 2017, when things were much bigger, there was already a lot of talk about how the dream of being a professional for Hearthstone was not really sustainable, and that competitive was a springboard to content for the people who wanted to go that route. So
right. And that seems to be the way to go if you are trying to have any kind of monetary investment into a game like Hearthstone that returns some kind of dividends for you. It's probably content, unless you are actually the best. Even if you're the best, you might not be
yeah,
able to, because there's so much randomness and so much grind involved. It's a tall order. I mean, literally players like Pocket Train, who just won the world championship in the previous grindy system, has gone on record already as saying, I don't think I'm going to try to compete this year. And that's telling.
yeah. And, even coming from it personally, the value proposition of working my job versus guaranteed, no questions asked, being the #1 professional Hearthstone player that always wins the world championship with the proportionate amount of effort. Even with that magic luck, I still think I would rather be in my job in terms of trying to make a living, which just makes, the whole situation with the prizing just feel kind of sad. And, Blizzard is still putting up $450,000 of prize pool for events this year. It's absolutely not nothing. It's
true.
It's just with the way that it's distributed and how few people have access to it, it just doesn't really seem worthwhile or to move the needle for people who are, trying to look at the game aspirationally as, something that they can do to make a living. Like the prize pool doesn't really make or break that.
Yeah. But surely you'll have some good news for us for Legends of Runeterra, right? And Riot?
Well, unfortunately, things are also looking a little bit grim, but at least the silver lining is that there is no definitive bad news yet. So,
hooray!
So, along with the layoffs, Legends of Runeterra released a State of the Game blog post, and there they talked a bit about how their focus is going to be shifting for the current year. So, currently, there are a pretty substantial amount of resources developed to both design and features for player versus player, most constructed formats that we're familiar with. They were working on a new draft mode as well. And then for the player versus enemy. So Path of Champions is the single player experience, and they've reported that it's been growing vastly more popular to the point that over 80% of players are playing Path of Champions at any given time, and that's the primary way people engage with the game. So with the layoffs and downsizing, that's going to be the new primary focus. And it's not clear what that means. Are there going to be more designs for competitive? Is there going to be competitive at all? Will there still be ranked ladder? All of these questions are indeterminate right now. And there will be another announcement from the Legends of Runeterra team on February 2nd. So next Friday, a week from today, we'll be getting more information. But, that's just another game where it seems like the business model just ultimately wasn't working out, and they're just going to keep downsizing and, just slowing on development a bit. So
unfortunate.
Yeah. And I can say that the dev team is amazing for that game as well. Also a great community. And I don't think for like a live service game, I've seen a dev team that's been quite as, transparent and forthcoming as theirs. So, it's really hard to, see people who are clearly putting their heart and soul into it, just end up in this spot where their game is kind of coming to a close, at least in the way it was first envisioned.
And, I think that's going to be a really good segue into our main topic, which is really talking about these card game competitions, how we're kind of seeing some of these really diminish or get much smaller than they were. We're seeing, Ron and I specifically have really talked over the last year a lot about how just the card games in general seem to be booming. Like there's so many card games coming out. There's so many card games in development. and just kind of how the card game landscape has really changed over the last, 10, 15 years. But even the last 5 years, it's really changed a lot, I would say. So I want to start with um, asking both of you first, do you think that overall our card games, and specifically like competitive card games, are they dying? Like, are they in a really bad spot? Is this something that like we should just say, well, this is kind of dying out. It's not going to be a thing much longer, and we should just kind of give up on it? Or is that just kind of like the complete pessimistic look, and you don't actually think that's how it is? Dankest, if you have any
Well,
thoughts, you can go first.
Well, you're going to see probably the first of very few optimistic views from me. And I think that the main problem is not that competitive card games are dying, but rather that casual card games are growing. So, I don't think that games are necessarily getting less popular because all of these card games are growing so much. Like, if you look at something like Magic the Gathering, the cultural impact that it has now is so much larger. You have celebrities like Post Malone and Joseph Gordon-Levitt who are famously big into the game. Post Malone's even on a card now. And, when I was growing up in the past, Magic was a pretty niche thing. And, you might have heard about people like, say, Brian Kibler, who were famous for competitive success winning the Pro Tour or doing well in the Pro Tour, winning events. And nowadays, people are going to know Brian Kibler for hosting a weekly Commander show. And over 80% of Magic players are playing Commander, engaging it with it socially in that way. And if you follow that game, you can see in the card design that Wizards of the Coast have been moving more to, feed that audience more so than the smaller competitive one that, well, it's maybe has grown. I don't think it's smaller than it was back in the day, but it's not at all the same proportion of the market for that game than it was then. And they're just no longer the primary focus. And, I touched upon it with Runeterra as well. Path of Champions is the way people engage with the game. And Riot's going to try and find a way to monetize that rather than try to use advertising money for large tournament prize pools to bring players in. And I think ultimately that's where I'm at. It's just that, the casual crowd has grown, which is good for us because it means that our hobby is going to be around and going to be sustainable. But we just can't rely on game developers to support competitive in the same way that we did in the past. As players in a community, we're going to need to adapt.
Ron?
Yeah, that's a really good take. I think I agree with a lot of the points that you're making as far as like casual is concerned. I will say, just as an overall trend from what I've seen from not just competitive in card games, but competitive in esports in general, it just seems like it's been an overall industry shift that so many companies are saying, hey, this isn't profitable at all. This like bleeds money and we don't want to put more money into it. And I think the competitive scene largely is dying, which makes me concerned for the health of like card games and in general and the trajectory that they're going to take, because I felt like in my experience at least, a lot of card games and how we enjoy them has been shaped by the top level and competition and what kind of makes different strategies rise to the top. And it's how I've engaged with card games for so long. So we probably all collectively will have to shift our mindsets in some way or another. It might become just more flashy things, content creation, enjoying the game more casually. Like basically, hey, all of you out there that were trying to make a living off of being good at card games, stop doing that. That's kind of the message that I seem to be getting, is unless you are absolutely insanely good, you should probably stop trying. It's a depressing message because I don't like hearing that. I'm not the best. I'm good enough to compete in a larger field, But when the field extremely narrows, like what seems to be the trend, then facing reality comes into play. And it's like, hey, this isn't really sustainable. And it's not even sustainable, like we mentioned in our news segment. It's not even really sustainable for the people who are the best and who are at the top with a lot of these competitive systems and how they're looking now. Even though it's nice to see that there's still some level of investment, it hasn't been removed entirely. It's the grind involves the amount of time necessary to be able to compete equates to like what a very minimal hourly rate, I'm sure. Even if you could guarantee the maximum payout and you always had the best luck and you won every event, which obviously realistically is not even possible, especially given the nature of any card game with RNG effects and just the luck of the draw to begin with. So it's sad for everyone who has competitive aspirations to, if you're viewing it in the most realistic light that you can, being like, okay, if I'm facing facts here, I don't think this is a viable way to pursue a career. And it was something that a lot of people had aspirations for and wanted to try to make that into a career for themselves. So given the way things are developing, if you enjoy a card game, enjoy it more casually and you will probably wind up healthier for it. As far as the actual scene, I think it's kind of dead, but dead in the way that we think of it now as competitive card gamers, not dead in terms of the overall future life of the games.
Yes. And just a couple more little things to touch on. Like, you're absolutely right there. Because they're doing so well at the mass market, card games are not going away. New ones are coming out. I know, even going through the news, like, we even missed one. Union Arena is actually getting an English release this year too. So if you're into anime card games, there's that one as well. Grand Archive is another game on the rise that we also haven't even gotten to cover because there are just so many already established games that are here. It's a growing hobby, and if you want to play for fun, you're going to be able to do it. Competitively, it will depend on the developers. I think that of these, Flesh and Blood is the only one with a true competitive path that's left in 2024. But it doesn't mean that things will be this way forever. There could be that, maybe the hobby grows so much that people do watch, do care, and third-party leagues are allowed and are able to thrive and make money and pay players. You never know what's going to happen in the long term, but for now, you can't count on the makers of the game paying you enough money to play it as your job like you could with Wizards of the Coast in the past. So here we are.
I think there's a couple of things that I want to point out too, and I'm glad you brought up Flesh and Blood because that ties in with some of the points that I was thinking too. Is that I think the games that we've seen have the best success, and I think specifically right now, Flesh and Blood has been growing, like you mentioned, right? Like, it seems like all these other games are pulling back on their competitive stuff, whereas Flesh and Blood has gotten more popular. It has grown in their competitive scene. And I think part of this is, as you guys mentioned, more of that kind of what is more of the casual stuff. Those games are playing into more of the casual things. But Flesh and Blood also does do something that I think some of the other competitive systems haven't done, which is they also have the Blitz format, which is a little bit more accessible. It's like a smaller deck, right? The games are a little bit faster. So I think for like the general public, it's a little bit easier to get into a format where you don't necessarily have to spend as much on a competitive deck for that format, right? It's less cards, they're faster games. So you can also kind of get that feel of just get in there, like play some games, and you don't have to necessarily buy this $1,000 deck for competitive, right? Because some of the decks are like $1,000, and it's a pretty expensive thing to get into. The other thing is that it did seem like for a while, a lot of the online card games were the ones that were really thriving, right? We had a lot of stuff with Hearthstone, Legends of Runeterra was kind of getting in there, even Magic, with Magic the Gathering Arena, they were kind of boosting a lot with their online stuff. And I think a big reason for that is because that's just more accessible, right? It's reaching a wider audience, it's more accessible. If there's things like in Legends of Runeterra and in MTGA, they have in client tournaments that people could like jump in there. So, in terms of the competitive stuff, it also made it more accessible for people to jump into. And then also in Magic, you mentioned things like Commander and like the EDH decks, right? Like that kind of stuff has just been so popular, but it's also not the competitive stuff. So we have seen this really weird shifting of like what's accessible to people, what is the easiest to get into, and how that's influencing, is it competitive or is it not? And if it's not as easy to get into, if it's not as accessible for people, then I think that's really hurting the competitive side, not only the card game as a whole, too. And I feel like that is part of why Flesh and Blood has been growing. Again, like I mentioned, they have the Blitz format, but they have also been putting in a lot of that. You know, they're getting creators, they're getting like artists. Every time they do like these big events, it's like it's a whole event, right? It's like a small convention on its own, kind of like the Pokemon does, right? They have for the Pokemon stuff, it's 2, 3, 4 days sometimes, right? Of like full, you have Pokemon Go, you have Pokemon VGC, you have Pokemon TCG, and they make it this whole thing. Flesh and Blood has been doing that as well. And I think when you get that, you also get more people who are more willing to go to those events rather than just, can I travel to this Hearthstone specific tournament? Or can I travel to this one specific thing? Whereas I know even you mentioned next weekend you're going to go and compete, but if you don't make it, you'll still be able to be there and spectate. You'll still be able to meet any potential pro players, or if there's any like maybe celebrity style people there, big content creators. So they're kind of mashing the like social aspect with the competitive stuff. And I think that that's another reason why they have been having more success in that field than other card games that aren't doing that, right? They're just not mixing the competitive and the social stuff. And that's kind of a downside. But I agree with you guys overall, though. Like, I do think that card games definitely are not going anywhere. I think we're just going to continue to see, as things change, we're just going to continue to see shifts in how card games do competition in, I mean, overall right now, the whole like games industry too is just, there's tons of layoffs at a bunch of companies. Esports in general seems to be on a decline, right? There's just a lot of factors I think in play here. And card games in the scope of things have always kind of been towards the bottom, sadly, right? They're always kind of been more of a niche thing than like CSGO or League of Legends, right? Those big like, games that you can look at
True.
and say, oh, those
Yeah.
are huge and popular. Card games have always kind of been more at the bottom. They're a little bit more niche anyways. So yeah, I feel like maybe they're kind of the first to get really hit, but maybe there will be a bounce back in another couple of years or after things shift again. But I don't know. It's just a very interesting time. And I think in the world overall, there's a lot of things changing, and these are definitely not immune to those changes.
Yeah.
Very much. I see it just as like a financial decision, and like everything is just so dramatically impacted by like the bottom line and what financially impacts these companies. It's not like it wasn't the case in previous years, but it seems like more and more with each passing year, companies, we see mergers, we see different changes, we see obviously the layoffs, like multiple layoffs that we saw. It was very sad news yesterday. But just like it's companies are just so consumed with the pursuit of like ultimate profit, that it feels, this just from a personal standpoint, but it feels to me like it would be ignored even if like something was doing extremely well, because in X, Y, and Z metrics, it wasn't doing well. So those are the ones that need to get cut, even though this other element of it is doing so well that it could support the back end version. And it often feels like there's no real connection being made from the leaders of companies to understand like the actual relationship between, for instance, the success of a game and the competitive field of the game. Even if maybe, as an example, esports is losing money, that might be fine because you can't quantify how many people started playing your game because of esports that make you money, or all of these other things. People are watching and people want to play the decks that they saw the competitive players play. So they're going to invest into card packs to get those decks, and that earns your game money. But that is not what they see when it comes to like the people who pass down the decisions from the top. It's, hey, look at our card pack sales. They're really good. Whoa, we lost a lot of money on esports. Well, let's get rid of esports. That loses money. Why would we keep that? Obviously, our card pack sales will continue to remain the exact same, and the sky is the limit, right? It's only ever going to go up.
Yeah.
Without ever making that mental connection. Hey, maybe there's some connection between these things. So that concerns me a little bit and does make me worry some for the future of the game. But I think overall there's still enough content creation, casual gameplay, people getting interested, advertising, and so on, that it won't suffer enough. But I feel like there's an impact that's just being totally overlooked and understated by people who, well, are honestly too rich and out of touch with reality and don't really notice or care about the other aspects of their game that they manage from above.
Yeah, and I think like on the other side of that coin, like by my day job, I am a data scientist, and well, I am the person who does attempt to quantify those things. And my guess would be more so than rather that they don't quantify it, that they have found ways that they have quantified as better ROI spend for that budget. And it's not so much that competitive is bad spend or getting worse, but more so that there are places that they can put that money that bring them in more. And, like I think that with any hobby, I think like it's just kind of the sad reality that if that hobby has mass appeal, that appealing to that mass is going to be bringing you in more money, more dollars, and improving your sales more than appealing to that competitive niche. And you can see though with sports, like traditional sports, you take football and basketball. Obviously, the greater population of Earth is not at the competitive level for those things, but people love to watch and love to engage with it once they have that understanding of it, and it's a part of their day-to-day life, and it's something they do. And that's kind of what gives me hope, is that maybe as card games grow, get bigger, more and more people engage with it, maybe there will be that desire or drive to want to see the best players, want to enjoy your hobby at that scale, and maybe competitive returns then. But like if I'm Wizards of the Coast and I were a data scientist there instead of at my current employer, I would be hard pressed to, say to find a scenario where spending money on a pro tour will bring me more players in than licensing other IPs to do crossover events for commander decks. Like I'm sure if you've been following it this year, the Doctor Who decks were a really big success and a really cool product. And, just anecdotally, it brought a lot of people in my local community into the game, and they've started attending the Commander group regularly because, a show that they love is in the game now. And, those are people who, quite frankly, would never watch a pro tour or take interest in that. And that's not to say the pro tour is bad. It was awesome. And, that's something that I watched and I took interest in then. But, Wizards was probably going to get me anyway, and I'm guessing that whatever they spent on Doctor Who probably got a lot more people than any competitive season did. So, until that demand comes back, until that big group of people now getting into the hobby want to see competitive, we're just going to be in a state where we can't rely on the companies making these games to give us our tournaments, give us our prizing, and make the events we want.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of where we're at. I do think that there is like a level of benefit that is being overlooked, but to your point, maybe that's not the case. Maybe it isn't being overlooked. They are looking at it and they're just making a purely like financial based decision on that. It's like, well, yeah, we could put our money there and it does have some benefits, but there's a different option that makes us a whole lot more, so we're going to choose that option every time. And at the end of the day, everybody's got like some shareholder to report to that is looking at how much more money they can make, and all these decisions are ultimately influenced by that. So it's hard to fight against.
Yeah, and the margin on digital packs is high at least, but it's just sort of funny to think about it as Activision Blizzard King is primarily, from a revenue perspective, the company that makes Candy Crush. And, like even World of Warcraft is a footnote in the grand scheme of things compared to Call of Duty and Candy Crush. And compared to Warcraft, Hearthstone is yet another order of magnitude down. So, like it does make money for them. It is good, but just the scale at which it brings them in money based on their ad spend just cannot compare, I don't think, to those other games and properties. And
Candy Crush competitive when
truly, but I really appreciate the team, and I just want to reiterate what you said earlier. I think this is probably the best that they were able to get, and the people who are still making the game really do care a lot about it. And it is a passion project to some degree.
Oh, absolutely. I think esports for Hearthstone would be completely dead as of last year, even like no system last year at all, if not for the incredibly passionate people that we have working on the team that probably fought tooth and nail to get even the little bit that we got, that has disappointed so many people, myself included. Like just trying to think about what we could have had instead, essentially being like nothing. I mean, it must have been a fight to get everything that we currently even have.
Yeah.
Look, in emergency flash news, we also have an update. Thank you, Robin. They do have a Candy Crush World Championship, by the way. So,
oh boy,
I did not know that.
That's the thing.
That's amazing.
Don't tell us what the prize pool is. I don't think my heart can take it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for going through this topic. I know this is kind of like a heavy kind of topic. It's kind of an in-depth thing, and there's a lot of different aspects to it, especially when we're trying to like cover this as applying to a lot of different card games, right? And then there's the different aspects of digital versus the physical games versus do you have to travel for things, and there's all those different aspects that we have in it. But I hope that people got something out of this conversation. I think that there was some really good talk in here. And do you have any final thoughts or anything else that either of you want to mention for this topic before we close it out?
I feel like I've mostly said everything that I want to say about this in as positive a light as I can put it, and I don't think I've been super positive. Just it's sad news for people with competitive aspirations. There's no other real good way to spin that. But if you just can try to reframe your thinking and change your focus on your relationship with any card game that you're interested in if you have, some competitive goals for that. It can probably go a long way towards improving not just your relationship with the game, but also your overall health. Just to not pour in all of these hopes and dreams that can easily get shattered over and over. It's not a healthy cycle to repeat. So a hard, long look at reality, and you can change some focuses.
Yeah, and I'll say be the change you want to see. Like, if you can't rely on these big official tournaments to come in and give you your competitive fix or your social fix, and you still want that, you're not powerless. Like, I managed to run a small local tournament here in Central Ohio last year, and hoping that maybe I can do that again. You can always find a league online, find tournaments, meet people. And the most fun I've had playing Hearthstone was going to a fireside gathering at my local pub in 2017 and coming in third place out of 30 people and taking home a beer as my grand prize.
That's
it wasn't
awesome.
exactly high stakes, but it was awesome getting to meet other local people who played the game, just getting to talk. And there's nothing stopping you from trying to find like-minded people and do that. So go for it. Engage with the game, and if you can't rely on the real esports deal, make your own competitive and find a way to engage with the game that works for you.
Yeah, and if you're not gonna go completely all out for really high stakes, you can just play for fun, and there's great ways to play in a competitive setting for fun, like THL, for example, which we mentioned already on the show. It's just it's basically a grassroots Hearthstone competitive league, and it's out there for fun as something that anyone can join. And there's multiple different things like that in multiple different card games that are out there. That's specifically for Hearthstone enthusiasts, of course, but in any community that you engage with, you should be able to find like-minded people who can form, some kind of a group to get that competitive fix if the game itself is not providing that.
Yeah, I'm 100% agree with you guys. I mean, like Dankest said, that's exactly what I did when I wanted to do casting. Right? It was like, well, there's not really a lot of opportunity to do the Hearthstone like professional casting, not a lot of openings, and I just started casting on my own Twitch channel. I started literally hosting my own tournaments so that I had games to cast, right? Like, I created that opportunity for myself. And that's a big thing that I tell a lot of people too, right? Is that if you want to get into that kind of stuff, or if you want to see that happen, do it yourself or work with some other people and, make it like a group collaboration so that, you don't have to do all of it, or maybe you don't know how to do all of it. Reach out to other people and ask, hey, I would like to see some more tournaments, but I've never hosted a tournament, but I know you have. Like, what would be your advice? Or how did you start doing that? Even just reaching out and like asking people is also a great way to network, and doing those kind of things. Like you said, Dink, is like, even just if you can reach out to your local communities, but obviously with like Hearthstone and stuff, it's very much like online. But if you do that, you also never know who you're going to end up networking with, or who you end up like getting eyes on you because of the things you're doing. And, I think that that's a big reason why I ended up getting into like the actual HS esports casting, is because of all the casting work that I was doing just on my own and some kind of third party stuff. Then eventually people see you. You don't always know who's seeing you, but people get there. So, the more that you do that and the more it spreads, the more that community will grow. People will see it. And people that are interested in that, or people who want to grow other aspects, will reach out. So, maybe you don't have to like do everything, but start small, and, eventually it may actually grow into something bigger and be something that a lot of people connect with and want. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we do see a lot of this kind of downfall, I want to say, or this big kind of drawback in the official like Dankest was saying, like, can't always rely on the official programs, but there's definitely things that we can do as a community. And I know the three of us, especially, there's tons more people, but the three of us are very like competitive. We're very interested in the competitive and tournaments, and we want to see those thrive. So hopefully those can still happen. And I know there's tons of other people out there that are interested in the grassroots stuff and playing in tournaments or watching tournaments. So if you see it, even just try to promote it. Show up if you see that somebody is streaming a tournament or doing something. Support even in the free aspects that you can, right? Watching the streams, you know, liking or retweeting stuff or any of that kind of stuff. Just show up, and that goes a long way too.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, guys. You think we should start doing our wrap up here? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for our return back to the show. And thank you for joining us this week. You can email the show at TCCG Roundtable at protonmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at TCCG Roundtable. You can also use our top pinned tweet there for a link to our Discord. If you want to join in our Discord, get some of these conversations going about different games, you can definitely do that. We'd love to have you in there. You can check out the video version of our show at youtube.com/dragonridertccg. And of course, anywhere that you can find audio podcasts. And if you also are interested, you can check out our Inked Gaming affiliate link in our show notes so that you can get some sweet, cool merch like playmats or, you know, dice bags, anything like that you might need for playing some games. And you help the show directly as well. And where can we find all of you individually? I'm actually going to throw this to Dankest first as like a, hi, welcome to the show. You're first. Where can people find more from you?
Sure. So you can find me on twitter.com/daddankest or x.com as the people say these days.
Do they?
I guess so.
No people.
Allegedly. That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
And yeah, you also can find Ron at twitter.com/RonHS or also on Twitch. And you can find dragonrider at twitter.com/DonIEDK. And also, just throwing it out there, you know, we mentioned find people online to play games with. You know, if you're one of those people who wants to play some weird card game that you think nobody plays, my door is open. So let me know. I probably play it. Say hi, meet people. It's the best way to start.
He probably does play it. He's not kidding.
Yeah, you and I both have like this just ridiculously extensive list of games that we have at least like tried out or dabbled in. And it's like, even last night, look, I'm getting ready to play some zombie game with friends. And I'm like, okay, I'm on Steam real quick, like waiting for them to get online. And here I'm like, oh, Warhammer 40K Warp Forge. Oh, this is a new card game. Okay, it's got mixed reviews, but like maybe I'll check it out. Like, oh, just another new card game. Sure, why not? I don't already have enough to do. Let's look. Yeah. So definitely reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you and talk about any random card game or any popular card game that. But thank you all so much for joining us this week, and we will see you at the roundtable.